New York City versus New Atlantis. Mary Jane versus Sarah Morgan. Stan Lee's masterpiece versus Bethesda's brand new IP. Good morning. This morning we're going to talk about Starfield versus Spider-Man 2. Both games are heavy contenders for Game of the Year, and we're going to have to make that vote coming up very soon. But let's be honest, this really just boils down to your console bias. It's either Xbox fanboys or Sony fanboys, and we both know what game you're going to vote for. I can't tell you how many Sony saviors have been inside of my comments before Starfield even launched and told me that the game is going to suck. And the same goes for the Microsoft Muppets that walked into my comments and told me how bad Spider-Man 2 is going to suck. The fact of the matter is they're both great games. They both had their flaws, and they're both absolutely undeniably entertaining AAA launches, and they lived up to all of their hype, which is a very hard thing to do in 2023. See, Starfield launched first, and it came out with 1,650 confirmed masses that you can land on, 100 universes with 10 planets each universe average, making over 1,000 procedurally generated planets. Not everybody has the same experience, not everybody sees the same thing. Starfield story can take 30 to 40 hours to complete, and if you want to 100% the game, it takes roughly 153 hours. Now, obviously, Starfield went for quantity when it came to their game because it takes about 14 hours to complete Spider-Man 2's story and about 25 hours to 100% the game. And Starfield being on Game Pass makes it a far more accessible game, meaning that if you really wanted a no-life neckbeard that 30 or 40 hours, you can just pay $13 for the Game Pass, just play it completely through for about a seventh of the price. However, Microsoft and Starfield are very savvy to the idea that most people will try to attempt to do that, and they will suck you in with a bunch of immersive side quests and people to talk to, things that will distract you from actually completing the game, and not to mention the game has a bunch of ultra rare POIs that you're going to want to explore. Like this Reddit user that found this insane looking landing spot. I've never seen anything like this before, and apparently it's the first of its kind. And this is where quantity comes in handy for Starfield, because there is an open-ended game just sitting here waiting for us to have more DLC and mods and support, because this isn't just a new game, this is a whole new IP coming from Bethesda. It's literally a new gaming universe that has a universe that you can explore within the new universe. The mods and the DLC for this game are limitless. Bethesda has nothing but good intentions to expand on Starfield, and it's going to be something that I'd imagine that you're not going to want to just pay $13 on Game Pass and just leave behind, especially if you actually enjoyed the game, which isn't hard to do. Enjoying this game, despite its obvious flaws, is actually really easy. I think this game was a really good experience. Bethesda went extremely hard on the character design and the ship design. They made the biggest map of any Bethesda game ever, being New Atlantis. This was far from easy, as it took Starfield roughly 7 years and a few delays to actually launch the game. And in that 7 years, Spider-Man released 2 games. In 2018, they released Spider-Man for PS4, which ended up being a colossal win for them. But with that said, Bethesda was still making Starfield, and in their own heads, their intentions were to launch for actually both platforms, Microsoft and PlayStation. It wasn't until about halfway through Starfield's development that they realized that they were only developing for Microsoft-based platforms, PC and Xbox. But on that note, it still took them 7 years, and Spider-Man in between those 7 years had launched 2 separate games. And when I say this, I'm not undermining the idea that Spider-Man took a long time to make or any of the details put inside of the game. The developers obviously busted their asses to make this game. But the sad truth is that Spider-Man is a far more commercialized and safe bet than Starfield ever was. A Marvel superhero sequel to an already successful game was a very safe bet. A brand new IP coming from a developer that just got crushed by their own consumers for having a bad game is not really a safe bet. So kudos for the BDE coming from Bethesda Studios, who needed this insane boost of confidence from their player base. But here's the question: was the juice worth the squeeze for the consumer? Is quantity usually worth the push over quality? And this is where Starfield absolutely fumbles. As you can see, there's a little bit of lifelessness to this character that we're looking at, and I just think that there's a little bit more life into Spider-Man. Spider-Man may have only introduced a few bureaus to the New York City map, but it is still a much more tamed environment that leaves them to just pump loads of quality into the game. The rats almost look just as detailed in Spider-Man 2 than the character we're looking at right now. I think the quality of New York City has its ups and downs. A lot of people are zooming into the render resolution and saying that there's issues. However, there's no issues to me with Spider-Man's graphical fidelity. I think people just get nitpicky online, and for the most part, it's probably Microsoft fanboys that see that there are fidelity issues with Starfield and they want to pick apart Spider-Man to make themselves feel better. However, Spider-Man looks and feels and plays amazing. But can you visit every major city in the United States? Absolutely not. Is that a problem? Absolutely not. It's okay to have an open world and not an open universe, because there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is obviously found in something like Spider-Man's fast travel. Spider-Man's fast travel is damn near seamless, with an incredible looking cinematic transition that immerses you in it. And I barely blink when I see this. Like, it doesn't even seem as if I've lost control of my character. I haven't seen such a good transition in games since maybe changing characters in GTA 5, perhaps, I think. Meanwhile, Starfield is literally a load screen generator, and going into your ship and sitting down, you'll get an animation. Travel to a new planet's orbit, that is a load screen. Fast travel to a landing spot in that new planet, and you will get another load screen. Standing up from your captain's chair will give you another animation, and then going into a building or landmass after you stand up will be another, you guessed it, load screen. Now, Spider-Man is also in 4K 30 frames per second, which is why I really didn't talk about the frames per second issue with Starfield, because it's not really that big of an issue. If you want to play Spider-Man in 4K, you're pretty much running it in 30 frames per second as well. That said, you do have the option for a performance mode where Todd Howard absolutely fumbled the ball. Much unlike Starfield, if you're in a high combat situation, you can toggle over to a 60 frames per second option that puts you in a performance mode, which is not something that you get in Starfield, and I feel terrible saying this, but I never had that issue in Starfield because I'm on PC. I would probably get motion sick in 30 frames per second or less. I think that the lack of performance mode in Starfield stems from a console war perspective. I do believe that now that this is a Microsoft exclusive, they really needed to make sure that they put a cap on the graphics and allowing you not to change them. Starfield was the first launch of the two games that were in an obvious console war, and they had to show their cards first, which means that they're not going to make you manipulate the NPCs or make any of the flaws in the game exacerbated beyond what they already were. I think that's a fumble in the court of Bethesda, and I hope that they fix this in the future, but both games honestly have bugs, and I've been seeing a lot of people on Twitter trying to compare bug for bug, and it's just very, very stupid. There's a bug in Spider-Man that turns Miles into a cube, which is actually pretty funny to watch. A little bit less funny, there's a save state issue in Starfield that can absolutely demolish your save state and probably revert you back to where you don't want to be, which absolutely sucks because a lot of these missions are very immersive and fun, and you probably don't want to replay them twice. Credit where it belongs is the fact that Bethesda probably launched one of their less buggy games that we've known them for, but I hate it when people say stuff like that because they should just not be launching buggy games to begin with. I can't stand it when somebody's like, yeah, that's my friend, he's an asshole, but you know, that's just who he is. No, dude, your friend's an asshole and you need to probably stop hanging out with him or enabling that behavior. And that's how I feel about Bethesda and other games like Call of Duty. If you have a studio that's notorious for having bugs, glitches, and subpar launches, then you need to fix that instead of level setting your player base into believing that it's just going to get better after you launch it. That is a crap business ethic. Now I'm done dragging Bethesda for that because I do think that they actually stepped their game up with Starfield quite a bit. And if I'm being completely honest with you, this was a hell of a game to do that on, and it actually gives me a lot of hope for Elder Scrolls 6 in the future, because if they can create a universe with a lot less glitches than they had in previous titles, then I'd imagine Elder Scrolls 6 in a more tamed universe similar to Spider-Man's is probably going to thrive. But back to my point, both games are obviously going to have flaws, because what game doesn't have flaws? Especially in today's market with developers having to put kits on two different kinds of Xboxes, two different kinds of PlayStations, and PCs that have like universally completely different components for every user, it is going to be very difficult for games not to have flaws, which is why Nintendo usually thrives in this area, because they really only have to port their games into the Switch. It really boils down to what are you willing to tolerate, what did you expect, what were you the most excited for, because both of the games lived up to their hype. Starfield lived up to everything that I wanted it to be, and it looks like Spider-Man is living up to everything that everybody wanted it to be. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I tried my best not to be biased at all inside of it and just really lay down the facts and really compare the game neck to neck. Make sure you subscribe and take a look, because I'm going to have a lot of Grand Theft Auto 6 stuff coming and a lot of up-and-coming games for 2024 that you're not going to want to miss out on. Subscribe, keep up on news, keep up on streams, keep up on thoughts, chop it up with me in the morning while I drink my coffee. Have a good day.